Cool. Um, so a little about myself before we start. I'm Sai Charan from India, and I'm a Unity student ambassador and a Unity certified associate. I've worked as a game development lead for Fountain Makerspace for the past 1 year. And yeah, I'm also into entrepreneurship. I have a startup that I'm working on currently. So you can hit me up on discussions on it anytime. My LinkedIn profile is on in the chat. And our today's discussion is going to be on Photon. So what exactly is Photon? So it's a cross-platform multiplayer game development framework. So many of the games like Ludo King, for example, implements Photon. And I won't take the example of Call of Duty or PUBG for instance, because they though they are multiplayer, they use a different platform called VVox, if you're aware of, and VVox has been bought by Unity last year around September, October. So primarily there are two platforms primarily for multiplayer. One is Photon Real Time and the other one is Mirror. Built on top of Photon Real Time is Photon Unity Networking, which is referred to as PUN, and built on top of Mirror is VVox. VVox is the one that is mostly used by AAA for AAA games, as in Call of Duty Mobile or Minecraft or anything, for example. So when you're scaling up, VVox, PUBG runs on VVox. So yeah, some of the best top games use VVox. While on the other hand, some of the rather simpler ones, they go for Photon for various reasons. So as I told you, Photon Real Time, it's basically a subscription based service, and it runs on Photon on-premise servers, and Photon has got its servers across the globe in different locations, and you can connect to any one of the Photon servers, or you can host your own server. So Photon server hosting is also available. The process is given in the documentation. Or if you're an indie looking for in the initial stages of the game, you can stick to using the hosted server, using a Photon's on-premise servers. And as you can see, it's present almost in every part of the country. I mean, every part of the globe. So you can pick the one that is closest to you or gives you the best ping and go for it. Remember this tokens thing. We're going to come towards this later on, what this token actually means or refers to. And yeah, Photon supports these different protocols, so almost all protocols. So yeah, going forwards, so what we are going to primarily deal with today is PUN. So Photon Real Time is like, you can say, rather the low level thing. So implementing it might be a little difficult, but Photon Real Time can be used in different platforms. Like it can be used in Unreal, Godot, or Cocos, or any game engine, for example, or your own custom game engine if you have one. So it can be used for any engine, but PUN, as the name says, it's very specific to Unity. So it is so PUN has 3 layers. You can basically break down into 3 layers. The lowest level is made up of all the DLL files and the protocols and things like that. The second layer contains the logic handling of the Photon servers. So you can that is like the Photon real-time part. On top of the Photon real-time is the PUN layer. The PUN layer consists of the specifics to Unity, some functions which are specific to Unity, some callbacks specific to Unity, and things like that. So PUN basically makes the life of a Unity developer a lot easier, but yeah, you cannot use it for a different game engine. I'm sorry. Yeah. Now, when should you use PUN and when should you use real time? If you're building anything on Unity, and if you're okay with a server connection, like a common intermediate server connection, you can go for PUN anytime. And that is probably the best option if you're in the initial learning stages. However, if you want a P2P connection, your only option is Photon real time, because using PUN, you cannot create a P2P connection, but you'll need Photon real time for that. And the same sort of a functionality can be achieved using both PUN and Photon Realtime. Photon Realtime is also referred to as load balancing API because it basically handles all the server end of things. That is like the crux of it. So yeah, it is also referred to as load balancing API. Here and there, you can see it up in the documentation. And yeah, PUN, yeah, so the same functionality can be achieved using both. PUN is basically an abstraction of Photon Realtime, the level 3. However, obviously implementing using PUN is a lot easier compared to real time. And both of them are cross-platform, as in the very first slide about Photon says that it's a cross-platform game development framework, right? So both of them are cross-platform. So platform is not really something you need to worry about. And yeah, so when we need to work in game development, or I mean multiplayer games specifically, when we need to talk about multiplayer games, the two basic common things that we'll be needing is lobby and room. So lobby, I think all of you are aware of what they are, so I don't, if you have any questions, you can just feel free to drop a message. I'll keep having a look at them in the chat. So lobby and room, I think, are self-explanatory, so I'm not talking much about them. Let's go forward. So let's get started. So this is the website, photonengine.com, and you need to sign up accordingly. And once you're done, this is the dashboard that you see. You need to create a new app. So every Photon game every multiplayer game built using Photon needs to get an app ID. That app ID is like a unique identifier to that game. So yeah, you need to create a new app. When you click on that, it is going to ask you the Photon type. So let me just show it manually from here. So let me go to photonengine.com and I'm going to my dashboard, my applications. So you can host your own servers, as I said. Yeah, if it's up to you. So I'm going to create a new app. So as I told, you can use different kinds of things. So Photon also provides voice communication and chat features. Bolt is something, I guess, rather new. I'm not really sure of what it is, so I'm not talking about much. While Photon Realtime and Photon PUN, yeah, we've been talking about it all the while. So let me go to Photon PUN, give your application a name, and yeah, these two are not required fields. So if you want to fill them, it's up to you. I'm not creating one more new field because I've already made one. I'm not creating a new app because I've already made one. Let me just go back. Okay, so yeah, I've created an app, Photon Unity Tour. This is the app that I've created specifically for this session. So once you've created that, you're gonna get something like app ID, as you can see here. You can copy this, just click on this and Control C. Just copy it into the clipboard and have it. And you'll be needing that later on. And then open up your Unity project. Once you're done with this, let's go back to the slide. Yeah, so we've selected Photon PUN, and yeah, that was the entire setup required on web end, on the web browser. Now let me open up Asset Store, open up your project, have your single player built. Initially, you can obviously, any multiplayer starts with a single player, right? So have a single player built and then open up your Unity project, go into Asset Store, search for PUN 2. Yeah, it'll be by Exit Games. Yeah, as you can see, PUN 2 by Exit Games. Download and import it into the project. I've already imported it. So let me just show.
Sorry to interrupt, Sai. We can see the Unity editor.
Oh, okay. My bad. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it visible now?
Yeah, you can see it. Yeah, it's clear.
Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Thank you for letting me know. So if there's any issue, please let me know.
Sure.
Yeah, so you can open up the Unity editor and go into Asset Store. In the Asset Store, just search for Pun2. Yep, and this is it, Pun2 free. It will be by Exit Games, so you need to import it. Let me just, I've already imported it, and let me just show something. I want to show. So I usually have this habit of not importing the demos. So if you want to be very specific of what you're going to import, what you'll really need is Photon real-time and Photon libraries and Photon Unity networking. The Photon chat can be ignored. So that's basically up to you what you want to go for and what you want to skip. But yeah, it's up to you. So once you're done importing, it is going to open up a window. You can go into window, Photon Unity networking, highlight server settings. You remember the app ID that we copied earlier from Photon web dashboard? So just copy this once again in case we did not copy earlier and paste it here. It goes into app ID real time. Yeah, so and so if you also want to use chat functionality, if you've created Photon chat, it is going to give a different app ID, so you can paste that here. And another thing, another important feature is that in some multiplayer games you might have it like a player in using version 1 needs to connect only to players using version 1. He should not be connecting with players using version 2 of that application. So in such a case, you can mention the app version here. So let me say 1.1. So all the other players running on 1.1 version of that specific application only are going to be connected among each other. So yeah, this can be required in some games and the developer might choose to ignore. It's up to you. It's totally up to you. And if you have your own server, if you've created your own custom server that hosted your own server, then yeah, this goes for the IP and port and proxy, or all of the details. And yeah, the protocol, everything you can basically edit. And if you don't want to log everything, so it's pretty flexible, as you can see. Another thing, another important thing, so you see this username server and fixed region. This is something very important. So basically what happens is, as I mentioned earlier, Photon connection players are connected using an intermediate server with PUN. So it's very crucial that two instances of the game are connected to the same server to be able to see each other. Let us say I'm connected to India server, Photon India server, while you are connected to some Singapore server. In that case, we will not be able to connect to each other, which is obvious. For that case, in such situations, during the deployment of the game, it might be fine. You'll get a different set of random players. I'll get a different pool of random players. But during the development phase, for whatever reason, if I'm running an instance of the game in the editor and another instance standalone built instance, if they both are connected to two different servers, it might be a problem. So you can basically hard code the region. You can basically hard code the server you're connecting to. So in this, you see the fixed region, right? So I gave IN over here. IN basically refers to India server. Let me just go back and show it here. So yeah, we have a server in India and the token is IN. So if I want to connect to a server in Chinese mainland, I'll give CN, and South America SA. So it's up to you. So whichever is your closest server, pick that one and you can connect to that. Let me just go forward. So yeah, so I've given IN and that is all that you need to do. So with this, the server setup is done. After the server setup is done, let me just show where we proceeded. So the first thing is we need to establish a network connection. So we need to check if we are able to connect to the server. Before we can even try connecting to a room or a lobby or a player, we need to check if we are able to connect to a server. So for that, let me first create an empty, an input field. I've created an input field, and initially it's not interactable. I want to make it interactable only when I'm connected to the server. So I've created a script called as network manager. I've created an empty game object called network manager. I've created a script called network manager. I'll just open it up. Just give me a second. And voila, here it is. So yeah, this is my network manager script. Inside the network manager, I'm taking a reference to the input field because I want to make it interactable once the server connection is successful. So as soon as the game is starting, in the start function, I'm saying photon network dot connect using settings. So these settings here, that refers to the server settings that we've edited earlier. So we've given fixed region and all of that, right? So I'm using that basically server settings file to connect to the server. So photon network dot connect using settings. And yeah, two important things. Always use this namespace photon.pun, and we need to inherit from a different class mono behavior pun callbacks. So these two are very crucial for you to get any callbacks from the photon, from the pun end. So yeah, once these two are done, you'll be able to access photon. Photon network can be accessed only when you have using photon.pun, and mono behavior pun callbacks is required for this function. You'll get this callback only when, obviously, yeah, when you're inheriting from this class. So yeah, on connected to the master. So on connected to master implies when this connection is successful to the server, when this server connection is successful, I want to make the input field interactable. And then I want to, another important thing is automatically sync scene. So let us say there are 10 players. I want to, and take any game, for example, PUBG or Call of Duty. So three people will be connected to each other, but only one, the server who's created that connection, the host who's created that connection will say start game. And when the game starts on his device, all the other clients' devices also will be updated to the latest scene, whatsoever it is. This can happen because automatically syncing scene is unable to true. Always ensure that automatically sync scene is equal to true. And yeah, I'm just logging that connection is successful. Let me just run it. And yeah, once the connection is successful, as you can see, once the connection is successful, this is interactable, and yeah, I'm just stopping it. So after this, let us just think about the flow. After this is done, I want, once I enter the name, enter my username, I want to get a button saying start game. So what basically happens when I click on start game is that I'm going to create a new room. I'm going to join the room, and I'm going to wait for the other person to join my room. When I have the required number of players, in this case, it's 2 players, 1 into 1. When I have the required number of players, I want to actually load the game, start the final game. So I'm going to have, I'm creating a button called as start. Initially, I'm going to set active false. So once the player input is successful, so yeah, so the player input is given completely. Once it is entered, I want certain thing to happen. Whatever happens comes under the lobby category. So once the flow is usually like establishing network connection, then the lobby, and then the room. So that is like the flow. So let me open up the lobby manager. What happens? Let us just have a look. So this can be quite a bit long, but it's pretty easy, honestly. So once the string has been edited, I mean, once the input has been given, I want the start button to be set active true, to be enabled. So for that, I'm taking a reference to the start button, and I'm also taking a reference to the player name because to the input field, because I want to store that player name in the Photon server end, right? So activate start button. So when I click, I'm calling this function activate start button when the start button is clicked. Sorry, when the input is, I mean, see, let me show. So when I'm done editing the string, when I'm giving the input, I just press enter, and on end edit, I'm calling that function activate start button. So what does activate start button do? It basically stores my name in the Photon's end. That is my nickname. And I want to set active the start button to true, and obviously the uh, input text box needs to be turned off, right? So yeah, and what after that, it's straight up clicking the start button. So for that, I again need to write a public function start button dot. So what basically I'm doing is, once I'm clicking the start button, I want it to become non-interactable, and I want the text to change as starting or loading. That's what I'm doing in the first line. Start button dot get component in children, set text loading, and I want it to become uninteractable. So turning off the interactability. So what I first need to do once I clicked, I need to check if there is already a room existing. If there's a room existing, and if it's available for me to join, I need to join that room. So photon network.join random room. It will initially look out for any open rooms. It will see if there is an open room, it will join, game will start, and all of it. If there is no open room, it will throw me a callback, and that callback is on join random failed. So what really happens is, once it has failed, it basically implies that there is no open room for me to join in. So I need to create my own room. And yeah, I'm calling a new function called create room. What I'm really doing in create room is that for creating a room, I basically need two important parameters. One is the room name. Obviously, the room, without room name, I can't go ahead, right? And other one is the maximum number of players, and some of the other properties related to that room, like, is the room open? Can someone else view my room? Can someone else join my room? Is it open randomly, or can someone else only with a specific code can join my room, like that? So I'm going to take first initially create my room name. I'm creating a string room name equals room unity random. I mean, I'm creating a random integer from 1 to 1000. And the other part is room options. It's basically a class, and I'm creating an object, room options. So let me just open up this. So this class has a bunch of variables. So is visible basically enables if others can see that room or not. If I have a list, can others see that room or not? And is it open? So basically, if the maximum capacity is 10, and if only 5 have joined in, the room is still open. And once it reaches 10, the room is no longer open. So yeah, it verifies that. Maximum number of players, this is very important. So yeah, and by default, if you leave it, it takes it as a 0, and it becomes like infinite limit. But I don't really think that is what you're going for. And player TTL is time to live. So let us say you have some internet failure and you're disconnected. How long should the game wait for you to join in before it finally kicks you out? So that is player TTL. And empty room TTL, let us say for some reason all of the players in that room lost their connection and they're not able to join in. So how long should the server wait before it can finally kill the room, completely destroy the room? And note that these TTLs are always in milliseconds, are always given in milliseconds. You need to note that. So yeah, let me continue. So I've created an object, room options, is open, true, is visible, true. Max players, I've given it as 2, but you can create a public variable and take input from that. And also remember, you need to typecast it into byte. And player TTL, I've given it 5 seconds, and empty room TTL, I've given it 60 seconds. After these are done, just call the function create room, photon network dot create room, and send room name and room options as arguments. So that is all that you need to do for creating room. And let us say for some reason, for some unstable internet connection, or for whatever reason you could not create the room, you're again going to get a callback from Unity. It's going to say on create room failed. You can simply say, yeah, try once again, just retry. So if it fails once again, the second time, you'll get a call back. The second time, you're again going to call on create room. So it happens infinitely in a loop. So yeah, once the room is successfully created, whatever happens after the creation of the room goes into the room manager script. So I've created another empty game object. So yeah, let me just show you. Inside start button, I've assigned start game function from the lobby manager script, because yeah, start game is basically trying to look for a random room. So yeah, that is the point where you're starting the game, right? Where you're trying to join a room or whatever. So yeah, lobby manager script is assigned to a new empty game object, and room manager is also similarly assigned to a new empty game object. Room manager script, I've kept it very simple. So once you've successfully joined a room, it can be a newly created room or your own room or whatever. Once you've successfully joined a room, you're going to get this callback on joined room. It's again everywhere. Just remember using photon.pun and mono behavior pun callbacks. So yeah, inside this callback, I'm going to look if I am the master client. So the master client is basically the host, the one who's created that room. So if I'm the master client, I want to load the level wait scene. So why wait scene? It's because, let us say I've created a room, only I am present, there's nobody else there. I don't want to immediately start off the game. I want to go into a waiting scene wherein there's a timer for, like, let's say 60 seconds. So it goes like 60, 59, 58, 57 until 0. So I want to wait for that period of 60 seconds for someone else to join in. I'm going to, only if I'm master client, I'm loading that scene. So usually in Unity, what we do is scene manager.load scene or application.load level, but it has been deprecated, right? So scene manager.load scene is what we do. But when you want to load a scene across the clients, across all the clients connected to your room, you got to do photon network.load level. This loading of scene is going to be a little different. So yeah, you got to do photon network.load level and give the string, or also the build index. Anything works. So yeah, that is it for the room manager. Let me just show you. I'll just run the whole sequence, and if there's any questions until now, just feel free to ask me. Okay, so let me just type in my name and Sai. Loading. I've given a time of 20 seconds. This is a completely different scene, as you can see. It's going to wait for 20 seconds, and I programmed it so that after 20 seconds, if it still is not able to get someone else to join it, it needs to throw me back into the main menu. There you see. I'm back here. Again, I can type in my name. Again, I can try to join in. It will create a new room. So yeah, until and unless someone joins in, it happens that way. You can change that part the way you wish to. So let me just open up the wait scene. So this is the main scene, and this is my wait scene. Wait scene is very simple. It just has one timer component, nothing else. Oh yeah, also it has one script on an empty game object called wait manager. So apart from this timer and wait manager, there's nothing else on this wait scene. You can add the complexity, you can add a lot of UI visual elements to make it complex and more beautiful, but the core of it, the crux functionality of it is just this much. So let me just open up wait manager. Again, I'm using photon.pun, and yeah, that is it, mono behavior pun callbacks. So I need two variables here, primarily, three variables. One is the current time variable, which is my private variable. and a public variable to give me the max amount of time, and a reference to the timer text component, the text mesh flow in this case, but yeah, the timer text component. So initially, when in the start function, I'm setting the current time equals to maximum time, and I'm setting the timer.text, I mean the timer text as it is. So I'm calling this coroutine timer update. So what basically I'm doing inside this coroutine is, after every 1 second, until the current time is greater than 0, as long as the current time is greater than 0, I'm waiting for a second. I'm reducing that time by 1 second by one value, the variable by one value, and then I'm setting the time to the text to the latest time. If I failed, if I'm out of this loop, I'm doing photon network.leave room, because nobody has joined in within the respective time. I'm leaving that room, and which scene do I need to go back? The initial first scene, the main menu. So that's what I'm doing. If I'm the master, load level main. So if you're not the master, you might have this question, what if you are not the master? So if you're not the master, then you have somebody else in the room who is the master. So when two people are there, at some point, the game will begin, right? So when there are more than one person, the game will begin. So that is not a question. You not worry about it. So yeah. And coming back, if at all in between, if at all by the time I joined in, like for example, there is somebody else, the host is already there, he's waiting, and I joined in. If the player count of the current room equals the maximum number of players in the current room, I want to stop all the coroutines. All the coroutines here specifically refers to the timer update. I want to stop this timer update. I don't want the timer to go on anymore. And I want to start another coroutine called as players matched. So what does players matched coroutine do? Let me just open up players matched. So what this does is, I am updating the timer.text. I no longer need to show the timer. I just can show X versus Y. So I'm saying photon network.local player.nickname. So it's basically my nickname, the name I've entered, versus versus photon network dot player list others. So apart from myself, excluding myself, it gives me an array of all the other players. And in this case, we know that there are only two players, and the other array would consist of only one element. So I'm hard coding it as 0, but in other cases, you can basically write a loop and access all the element or all the other player details. And you can say, you can get their nickname. So it can be like Sai versus Hussein. So something like that. You can, or yeah. And always note, if I am viewing it, it is going to say Sai versus Hussein. And if Hussein's viewing it, it's going to say Hussein versus Sai. So my name is going to be first. So yeah. It's going to be there for 7 seconds. I've randomly given this number 7. It's going to be there for 7 seconds on the screen. And after that, if the master client will load the level game. Also, if I'm the master client and this function is initially being called from the start, right? Also, what if I'm the master client and somebody else joins into my room? What happens is this. You're going to get a callback on player entered room. So called when a remote player enters your room. So I am the host, I am there in the room already. The counter says 15 seconds, 14 seconds, 13 seconds, and somebody else joined in my room. So I'm going to get a callback on player entered room. At that point, I know that I have enough number of players and I can continue. So I'm going to stop all the coroutines, which is the timer coroutine specifically. And I'm going to start the new coroutine players matched. Again, the same thing. So this is pretty much it for the weight manager script. So yeah, once the weight manager is done, let me just clear off this. So yeah, that's pretty much with the weight manager. And once the weight manager is done, I need to go into the other one, the game scene. So here's my game scene. So I basically pulled off a small asset from the asset store, and this is my game scene. This scene is going to get loaded after this 3 scripts are completed. So far we've seen network manager, network manager is initially used to establish the server connection. Lobby manager is used to create a room, try to join a random room, then create a room and things like that. Room manager basically doesn't do pretty much anything in this particular model, but yeah. And then we have a wait manager. So let me just, I've already built this. Let's try and run 2 instances of it. Okay, so yeah, this is connected to the server now. And I'm going to open up the editor. Oh, sorry. I've started running a different scene, the wrong scene. Main scene. And there you go. So we've got the main scene. I'm going to enter my name, Sai. Press enter. Yes, it says this. It shows the start button. Now I'm going to enter my name, Charan. Press enter. I want to create a room using the Unity editor because it'll be easier for me to view the logs. So let me just open up and dock it here. Just a second. Yeah, I've docked it here. So I'm going to create, I'm going to start here, and you see, start. It's looking, now it says Charan versus Sai immediately. Here it says Sai versus Charan. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to be like the local one versus the other one. So in this case, it's different. So initially I'm moving this player, right? So on the Unity editor instance, I'm moving the player. Let me just see if the player is updated on the other instance as well. The editor instance position is updated on the other instance as well. So yeah, this is the other instance, and you can have a look now. So yes, pretty much. Let me just also move this instance to a different position, and okay, yeah, now let me have a look. Okay, so I am like poles apart. Let me just have a look from the editor instance. Hey, where is he? Oh yeah, now I can see. Can you see him? Let me just maximize. Yes.
Yeah, we can see him. Yeah.
Yes. So yeah. So the player, the position, animations, and transitions, everything is accordingly being updated. The rotation and details are accordingly being updated. So yes, I've. So now you can see that in the editor, which is basically the host, the master client, I've stopped the game. I've come out of play mode, and it has accordingly been updated in the standalone instance as well. So I can no longer see the player. So what this implies is that host migration is being handled automatically by Photon engine itself. So that's one less headache for us. Host migration is taken care of by Photon engine, and you need not worry about it. So the last player or the next player in the list gets the host status accordingly. And I'm going to close this instance as well. Yeah, perfect. So this is basically about the setup and connecting two players on the game. Now let me come to the actual gameplay part. How am I syncing the position and the rotation and various transform of the players? So I pulled off this asset from the asset store, this free asset from the asset store, and these are all asset related items or asset related game objects, and I've created a simple third person functionality using Cine Machine. So one important thing here is that when you create a scene using, when you create a game in multiplayer systems, let me just pull up the player. Let me just put it up here. Might be better. Yeah. So this is my player. So when we're creating, have all your single player built initially, and after that, add two components. Add one component primarily, which is Photon View. What Photon View basically does is it handles all the transfer of data across clients. So it basically acts as the identity of your instance. If you have, yeah, you can see this ID, right? So this ID is basically your identity, and it conveys the position and all other information across clients. So yeah, so and what components needs to be observed. So I've created two components, Photon Transform View and Photon Animator View. So I basically want to sync two components primarily. Anybody in any game, the two primary components you start off in a game with is obviously the movement of the player and the animations related to that player. They're like the standard basic ones, without which no game will exist. It can be 2D, some form of a movement would be there, right? So movement and animations are the primary ones. So Photon already gives you, you can simply add component, Photon Animator View and Photon Transform View. Photon Animator View lists out all the layers you've got and also all the parameters. If it's a continuous parameter, set it as continuous in the drop down, and if it's a discrete parameter like a boolean, set it as discrete. Boolean or a trigger, you can set it as discrete. And if you don't want a certain parameter to be conveyed, if you don't want a certain parameter to be conveyed across the clients, you can set, you can disable that as well. It's up to you. And yeah, these components, as soon as you add one, like let me just remove this. So, okay, let me just apply. So now this is removed, right? Let me just add once again. Oh yeah, notice the observed components. It basically observes auto find all. You can also manually fix it, but yeah, auto find all is very good. So why not? So Photon Animator View, and as soon as I add it, it is added as an observed component. So yeah, we need not worry about it much. And again, I'll have to fix this. Jump is a discrete, land is discrete, 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 and a discrete. Perfect. Yeah. And also when you have the, when you're trying to view the transform basically comprises of three different variables, right? Position, rotation, and scale. So you can basically choose what do you want to synchronize. So if at all your scale is also updating at different points in the game, you can choose to synchronize that. If not, you can choose to ignore that. You can basically check and uncheck accordingly what you want to sync and unsync. After this part is done, in general, let me just open up, you'll have a game manager, right? So I have my game manager here. So game manager script is very simple. I'm having a bunch of transforms to act as my spawn points, and I have a reference to the Cine Machine third person camera because, yeah, because if you're aware of Cine Machine free look camera, we need to assign the follow and look at variables to the target. For that, I need a reference. Initially, as the game starts, my player would not be there. In no multiplayer game starts off with an existing player instance. That's not how you do. So inside awake function, you're going to instantiate it, and instantiate is not Unity engine.instantiate. It's going to be Photon network.instantiate. Photon network.instantiate, give the name of the game object, in this case it's player, and ensure that player is stored under the resources folder. Under assets, create a resources folder and store your player game object inside that. Only then it is going to be recognized. So Photon network dot instantiate, and yeah, you have spawn points, right? So I've created a bunch of random game objects and place them at different places. So this is my spawn point 1, as you can see, and this is my spawn point 2. So yeah, so I've got multiple spawn points, and what I'm doing is photon network.instantiate the game object to be instantiated. Spawn points is an array. I've created an array of transforms. Random.range 0 to 2. I've basically hard coded the 2, or you can rather do it as spawn points dot length. It's up to you. Since it's a rather smaller use case, I've hard coded it. Remember, whenever you're using random.range, if it's float and float as arguments, it's going to be inclusive, and if it's int and int as arguments, it's going to be inclusive and exclusive, which is why I've given 0 and 2. Yeah, and yeah, so I'm going to take the position. After that, I'm taking quaternion.identity, and 0 basically refers to any additional data you want to send in or not. So you can leave it at 0 always. I'm storing this. Once the game object is created, I'm creating it as a game object, and I'm storing it in a variable G. That is because, as I mentioned earlier, for the third person functionality, I need to assign these. I cannot assign these before the game begins, before the game object is created, because the player object is not present in the scene. Only after the player object is created, I'll be able to assign it, which is why I'm taking a reference to this component using this public cinemachine free look, and third person cam dot follow equals, I want to basically, I have created just let me, yeah, so the player position is, the player pivot is actually at the foot, and I don't want to look at the foot. Obviously I don't want it to look at the foot, so I've created another game object called as ref. I want to keep looking at towards the face, the neck region of it. So I've accordingly pulled up and down the empty game object. This is nothing but an empty game object. So what I'm doing is g dot transform dot get child transform. So what I'm doing is I'm basically getting the third game object, the reference game object, and I'm assigning it inside follow and look at. And in the earlier, when we've tested it, you must have noticed, you noticed that both of the game objects are present right next to each other, right? So that is because I'm doing random.range. In this case, I've done that way, but you can actually code it and make sure that there's only one player at a particular spawn point. That's totally possible, and yeah, it's easier as well for you. Yeah. So that is pretty much it. So yeah, we've covered almost all of it. Let me just quickly run through the presentation. So we've established the network connection using connect using settings. And this is not what we've done basically. This is a rather easier way. So in this, what I've done, let me just show you. In this, what I've done is I've tried joining a room, then I've created a room, and instead of waiting, I'm directly loading the game. That is quick start matchmaking. This is called as quick start matchmaking, wherein instead of waiting, I directly join the game. But that is not very often used. Which is more often used is delay start. So what happens in delay start is, as I showed, you again try to join a random room, create a room, and then you load the wait scene. Wait scene is where you get the timer. Let's now make the wait scene, and in that you have the timer, and yeah, we basically built the timer. And after that, yeah, this is a different way wherein you basically get the list of all the players and everything. That is pretty huge, but yeah, it's also easy to do. After this is all in the menu end of things. After this, we'll come to the player networking, which is also the game setup. Always remember photon network.instantiate, and you need to get the name of the player, and the player needs to be in the resources folder. So the game object has to be in the resources folder if we're referencing it using a string, its name. So yeah, make sure it's in the resources folder. And instead of new vector, you can rather do spawn points the way I did. And for client communication, there you go. So this presentation was actually built using a previous version of the editor, I guess 2018. No, this was done using 2019.1. So yeah, it's going to look a little different, but yeah, serves the purpose. It serves the purpose. And remote procedural calls, if you want a certain function to be called across all the clients, you give it the attribute pun rpc, and that function is called using this syntax. This is pretty much it. And yeah, that's it. So I am gonna open it to questions.